Hello, and welcome to the next installment of the Publish with Purpose author interview series, where we interview authors we know who have been very intentional with their writing and their work's purpose. I'm Tara Alamani, the founder of Emerald Lake Books, and today I get to speak to author Bonnie Armstrong, who is the author of An Apparently Normal Person. Hi, Bonnie.
Hi, Tara. It's good
It's
to
so
see
good
you.
to have you here today.
Nice to be here. Thanks.
So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your book?
Okay. As you say, my name's Bonnie Armstrong, and my book's title is An Apparently Normal Person, because that's who I thought I was for most of my life until in my 50s, my body started falling apart. And the subtitle of the book is From Medical Mystery to Dissociative Superpower. So, and that tells kind of the arc of the story. I was in a wheelchair before I learned that I had had a dissociative disorder since I was 2. And it had served me very well across my lifespan. And this is the story of that healing quest and how I came to move from a wheelchair to hiking at Machu Picchu.
Mm. And so what prompted you to write the book?
Well, it took so long for me to get a good diagnosis. And I became aware after the diagnosis and after I learned that, in fact, there wasn't anything medically wrong with me, that it was a psychological disorder that I needed to heal in order to heal my body. Um, I became aware that there were probably lots and lots of people who were living out their lives over medicated and misdiagnosed. And I felt like my story might help folks understand that mind body connection in a way that could be healing for them as well.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I really liked about it as well is when you and I first spoke early on, you talked about how there is such that the media has done such a disservice to those who have dissociative disorders and what it sets that up like. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Thanks. That's certainly the other reason that I wrote the book, was to demystify dissociative disorders. It used to be called multiple personality disorder, and people may be more aware of it with that name. But the way the media portrays us, there's always somebody violent inside, and there's always something horrible that happens. Yes, you get a dissociative disorder like mine because of something awful that happened when you were very young. But as we age with dissociative disorders, very few of us have anything violent about our personalities. And I wanted to kind of make this the face of dissociative disorders, let people know that, number one, any of us could have them. People you know may have a dissociative disorder. And secondly, you're never too old to heal. You're never too old to work through some of the trauma in your life. And I think the healing quest that I was on, it can help people see that, oh, I can probably heal too. And that's my hope.
And so you mentioned the subtitle a little bit, From the Medical Mystery to Dissociative Superpower. Why do you consider disassociation to be a superpower?
Oh man, because it's been that all my life. It helped me survive my childhood. Because I looked back at my childhood earlier. I thought I had a perfectly normal, happy childhood. Was completely divorced from any conscious memory of the trauma. So this dissociative disorder helped me survive my childhood. It gave me an adulthood that was quite productive and lovely, a long marriage, 2 beautiful children. And then once I figured out, with the help of a very good therapist, that I had this dissociative disorder, we were able to use those skills to help me continue to function as I went through intense psychotherapy and the healing quest. So at all 3 stages of my life, it's been a savior for me, a superpower. And my people inside really bristle when people want to call it a disorder, as if as if somehow it were a problem. For me, it's really been quite a blessing.
I know early on you said that years ago, the approach to dissociative disorders was to try and integrate, and how that can really become very detrimental to the person who's living with that condition. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, as neuroscience and psychology and the medical world has learned more and more about childhood trauma and the impacts of trauma on development and on our lives, the world has shifted so that what the healing quest is about healing from the trauma. And if, as you heal from the trauma, the dissociative identities that have helped you cope with it, if they do decide to assimilate into a single personality, then fine. But if they don't, as some of mine did and some of mine didn't, then the idea of being a functional multiple is perfectly fine as long as it doesn't get in the way of your daily life. And so I consider myself a functional multiple, with a lot of integration that has occurred because there were dozens and dozens of bits and pieces. But now there are a group of us that live together that very happily, and that I would not really want to do without.
Yeah, I've been able to witness the closeness and the tight-knit community that you have internally, and it's definitely one of those things. I think I characterized it at one point in time like an eternal sleepover, where you just got the slumber party of everybody's there all the time, and everybody
Yeah.
knows what's going on, and that's kind of neat and
Well,
supportive of one another.
and I think we ought to give you a shout out too, because as we were editing my book, certainly there are parts in the book where each of the remaining alters have a voice, and they speak with their own voice. They write with their own voice. And so as we got to those parts of the editing process, those parts would come out because they wanted to be part of editing their own voice. And that made perfect sense to me. But poor Tara hadn't really dealt with 6-year-olds coming out of a 77-year-old's body before. And you did a beautiful job, and I greatly appreciate, all of us greatly appreciate the respect that you showed for each of the individual author voices.
It certainly was my most interesting editing challenge, not just because of having to deal with multiple authors, which I've done in the past, but because of the pronoun uses we had to figure out along the way. Is when was it I, when was it me, when was it we, when was it they? And, knowing that I'm having conversations with one face on the camera, although the face does change based on who I'm talking to, but it's like, it was a very interesting process to have to go through and figure out a consistent rule of thumb that we could use throughout the book, part of which showed the healing process that was taking place as well.
Well, and I think that's a very important point. The writing process and the editing process was very much part of my healing process. And so, and you were a big part of helping that to be true. But the need to write it down and then to think about what it meant and to write that down was very, very helpful and very healing all along the way. So thanks.
And thankfully, I hear that's true for many people who choose to write memoirs, is when they start writing down. I know the same was true for me when I wrote The Best Is Yet to Come. Just the process of sitting down and writing things out, and in a way memorializing them or making sense of them through the writing process was very cathartic. So let me ask you this: who would you consider to be your ideal reader?
Well, that's interesting, and it's shifted a little bit because since the book came out 2 months ago. Really anyone who has dealt with childhood trauma is an ideal reader for this book, because it does show both the impact and a healing journey that may have some validity for anyone who's on a healing journey. But what I'm finding is that people who are interested in psychology, who are interested in interesting mind, body, spirit stories, are finding the book really interesting too. So you don't have to have need a healing journey in order to really enjoy this book. And I again, I think that's partly due to the editing, but it's partly due to the fact that it's a really interesting story. And that it's a mystery story really at its base. I mean, trying to figure out really what happened it's really a mystery story that, and every page has some new information on it.
Certainly does lead the reader along your journey. As you're finding things out, that's when the reader finds it out. So there's not this omniscient narrator who's, you know, telling everything. It's really walking alongside you as you went through that process.
Right, and according to the reviews, a lot of people are finding that to be a really engaging way to have told the story. So I'm glad we chose that.
Mm-hmm. So what did you hope to achieve when the book was published? What did you initially think would happen?
I really, you know, I was such a novice in the publishing world that none of what I thought I was going to achieve, it probably made any sense in the real world. But it was mainly, I really wanted to use it as an advocacy tool. And that, of course, does make sense. I wanted to use it as an advocacy tool, both in terms of mental health advocacy, helping to reduce the stigma of mental health issues, including dissociative disorders, to demystify dissociative disorders, to help people even in the medical field. I've written a couple of journal articles for medical journals about what it's like to be a patient with a disorder that isn't ever taught in medical school. And so physicians, even psychologists, don't learn very much about dissociative disorders. And so my advocacy is that we are as prevalent as people with bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. That's what the prevalence numbers show. And yet you don't learn about us in school. And so hopefully this book gets picked up and others like it get picked up so that people who are going to eventually try and treat us and work with us actually have some real information about who we are and what it's like to have a dissociative disorder. And that's already starting to happen. So that's very exciting.
That's great to hear. So how has the book been received so far?
I'm just, well, I'm overjoyed. I guess I shouldn't say I'm surprised, but I am overjoyed. People from all different walks of life are finding it a helpful story. And I'm getting messages like, well, I have this friend and she has these, and do you think this would be helpful to her? And I'm like, if you think it will be helpful to your friend, please give it to them, and allow them to read it. And I am available to come and talk to book clubs. I'm available to come and talk to classrooms. I'm available to do anything that you think that will help us spread the word and get that message across that there is a healing journey, that everybody has their own healing journey, but that it is possible to heal no matter what age. And with better information, the medical and psychological worlds with better information, it won't take 10 years for people to get an appropriate diagnosis. 10 to 12 years is currently the average for people like me to actually get an accurate diagnosis and thereby get into appropriate treatment.
Mm-hmm. And the publishing process was something that was completely new to you since this was your first book. So what surprised you the most about it?
What surprised me most about the publishing business is, first of all, how little I knew about it, and how out of date whatever I did think I knew was. But then on the positive side, how many options there are today that are valid options that can fit with an individual's needs in a totally different way, I think, than the one size fits all. Let's go to an agent and then to a big publisher, and we sign away all our rights to that publisher. I mean, the Three Faces of Eve, the woman who wrote that, this was one of the things that really spoke to me. I learned that, first of all, Three Faces of Eve was written by her psychiatrist, not by her. And they had signed away the rights to her story. And it took her years to get back the rights so that she could write the true story of her life, because from her point of view. And she titled that book In My Own Words. And I wasn't going to be in that situation. And so early on, even though I had queried some traditional publishers and agents, the idea that I would be signing away my rights to my own story didn't sit very well with me. And the idea that an editor would have final say over how my story was told didn't sit very well with me. So when I learned about hybrid publishing, because I knew I couldn't self-publish, I don't have the technical skills nor the knowledge base, although you can hire a lot of that if you do want to self-publish. I knew I wanted somebody to hold my hand and walk me through the process. And so when I met Tara at a conference, and it was a virtual conference, so she spoke about all the various options and helped me see that hybrid publishing really gave me all of the things that I needed. So I borrowed some money from my brother, and I was able to hold on to my rights, to work with a really competent editor and publisher, but still maintain control, still maintain that, okay, final thing. And there were times when we didn't agree, especially my people inside needed to know that their voice was their voice and that they had control, because as children, we didn't have much control. And so that ends up being rather important to them, to, if their voice is going to be spoken or written, that they have that. So anyway, hybrid publishing, which I had never even heard about before I got into this process, became the best idea for me. And that I actually was accepted by 3 or 4, and the connection between Tara and her authors and Mark, the art director, really spoke to me. And so that energy helped me decide where I would publish. And it's been a fun journey.
And so what's next for you?
Getting over this cold. What's next for me is continuing on this the advocacy path. I am getting interviews like this. I'm getting I'm so sorry requests to talk to people. I'm hoping for speaking engagements at conferences. I've already done one big conference, and so I just want to use the book. I'm so sorry. As best I can to spread the word that healing is possible and that dissociative disorders can look like this.
Well, Bonnie, it's been great having you on our author interview series, and thanks so much for being one of our authors and for coming to us knowing what it is that you wanted to accomplish with your book. I think that's always the challenge, is sometimes we see manuscripts that people have written because they were compelled to write it, but they really don't know what they want to accomplish with it. And you had a very clear vision, which makes it very easy for us then to come alongside you and help you along that journey. So thanks so much for that.
Thanks. It was good to talk to you. I'm so sorry. Bye.
Okay. Bye.